Welcome to Grant Writing Simplified with Teresa Huff. If you're a freelance grant writer, an aspiring grant writer, or wondering if a career in grant writing is right for you, you're in the right place. For more great resources on grant writing, head over to teresahuff.com. But before you do, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the great videos to come.
Welcome to the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. This is the place to learn how to make a big impact in your community through grant writing and nonprofit consulting. The world needs you to step forward as a grant writer and use your skills to lead with confidence. I'm Teresa Huff, former special ed teacher turned grant writer and nonprofit strategist. In my 20 years of freelancing, I've helped nonprofits triple their funding and exponentially increase their reach. Now I'm stepping up to mentor freelancers and nonprofit leaders like you who are ready to take your skills to the next level. It's time to get intentional about your vision so you can create lasting change in your community. Learn the skills and strategies you need to become the grant writer the world needs. Let's do this. Before we get started today, nonprofits and grant writers often ask me where they can find grants. So I tell them about Instrumental. Instrumental makes my grant searching process go so much faster. It has so many features and data right there, and they'll even walk you through setting it up to help you get the most out of the system. Instrumental brings all your grant prospecting, tracking, and ongoing management under one roof. In fact, I've partnered with Instrumental to give you a free 2-week trial and $50 off your first month. Go to teresahuff.com/instrumental, that's instrument with an L, and use the code GWSPOD to start your free trial. That's teresahuff.com/instrumental. Go give it a try. Hey friends, welcome back. If you are trying to break into grant writing, I want to invite you to join me on the Fast Track to Grant Writer VIP program. This is a mentoring and coaching combination and interactive program, and now is the perfect time to jump in if you're wanting to become a grant writer, because I am rolling out some amazing new features this fall to help you gain traction and build your successful grant writing career. You can sign up and start learning today at teresahuff.com/VIP. Now, lately, we have been doing a series on fundraising. Last week, we talked about lean nonprofit startups. Today, this week's guest is an expert at major gifts. And we're going to get into what that means, how to go about it, and he has some fantastic tips. I'm talking with Kevin Fitzpatrick. He is the founder of the One Visit Away podcast, which happens to be one of the number one major rated gift podcast on Apple Podcasts. And I love the way he incorporates storytelling into so much of his work because it's memorable and relatable. And I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. He is also fantastic to follow on LinkedIn because he's a wealth of knowledge and he makes these situations that might seem intimidating or difficult, or you're kind of tongue-tied, what do I say? He just breaks them down and makes them so practical. And he's also like, just get out there, make the call, do the thing, and it'll really motivate you to gain momentum with your major gifts for your nonprofit. Here we go, and I hope you enjoy. Kevin, welcome. It's great to have you on the show today. Tell us a random fact about yourself.
Oh, man. So it's funny because I was pretty sure when you sent me whatever form, there was something about a random fact. And I was thinking about that, but then I went to fill out the form and I didn't see it. And I was like, I guess that's not there anymore. So random fact about myself on the fly. Grew up in New Orleans and we got Katrina'd in 2005. So I was like, how old was I? I don't know, 11 or 12 years old. Our one-story house that I lived in from, my parents built the house the year I was born in 1992 and lived there my whole life. Parents and family have been in New Orleans for over 200 years. And we had 5 feet of water in our house for like a month and rebuilt. We moved 17 times, including all hotels, apartments, houses, whatevers. until we
Wow.
moved back in 13 months later. So,
Wow. That's
there's
kind
a
of
little.
traumatic.
So it's funny because yes, I think it was probably traumatic for my parents, and obviously a lot of people, really significant, like never able to come back from it kind of damage, and lots of people died. But for me, fortunately, I was a kid. We always had a roof over our heads and food, and it was just kind of an adventure for me.
Mm.
And it was, some of my fondest memories of my childhood are going through those 13 months and just being so close as a family, and staying in. I remember there was one hotel in Houston we stayed in. It's a really nice hotel that we would not have normally stayed in, but they opened it up to, there was some kind of special opportunity for people who had evacuated. And I remember we had our border collie with us, and he's going up the 15 stories into the hotel room, and then just rebuilding our house. Me, my dad, and my brother, just every day out there working on the house and sleeping on cots with no AC and no electricity, and in the middle of the summer. And it was a very wonderful experience for me, like lots of growth, time with the family. So fortunately, it was a great blessing personally.
That's a really cool way to look at it, and that you can frame that in a way that you actually enjoyed it, and kind of like a long-term camping trip almost.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it really is crazy because it's just shaped so much of my life, where it's like, I can see things like burned to the ground, figuratively and literally. And to me, it's just like, all right, we're going to rebuild. Like, this is part of the journey. And so I'm, super grateful for my parents for, providing that sort of environment and just, way of living life, I guess.
Mm-hmm. How cool. That was kind of my next question is, do you feel like that has influenced your work now and come into play with how you approach problem solving and interactions and all the pieces of it?
Big time. And, part of it's problem solving. I mean, I've always been kind of like prepared for things. That's just kind of a thing I was born with. But I think this, really focused that in me, and just like being ready for stuff's going to go wrong, and you got to be prepared. But then also I saw so many opportunities of people going out of their way to be generous. So it's like, just the number of people who offered their home to us. I mean, there was one person in particular, I think we lived in their house for like 3 or 4 months one time. It was like a second property of theirs, but they were like, hey, y'all can have it. And other times people just hear we're from New Orleans and pay for gas at the gas station, or all kinds of stuff like that. So just seeing the generosity in people, and wanting, people wanting to help those that are hurting in some way, has definitely encouraged me to want to work in philanthropy and helping people become more generous, but then also helping gift officers give people opportunities to be more generous.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example of looking for the good. I mean, that's a terrible situation, a lot of upheaval, I'm sure, and a lot of stress on your family, yet you're pointing out the generosity, the fun, the enjoyment, the way you can reframe and look at those challenges as, hey, we get to rebuild our house. We get to do this together. We get to camp out. This is cool. Instead of the getting down and discouraged, you're looking and reframing that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it's been fun. And, part of that's just, it's interesting because I don't know how much of it is that's just how I am versus the experiences I had as a child, turned me into that sort of thing. So I'm not exactly sure, but it's been fun to, live life with some of those things in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure both sides have come into play.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's a great way to look at it and to use that to fuel your work now. So how did you first get into nonprofit work?
Yeah, so I was a student at the University of Dallas, and had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated. And my junior year, I attended an event that a local nonprofit was having, and just fell in love with the mission, and called them up and said, "Hey, I'd love to help out in some way. Can I do some kind of volunteer internship?" And they were like, "Sure." So I went and did my volunteer internship and knew I wanted to work at that organization when I graduated. And yeah, one thing led to another. They hired me full time the day after I graduated, and yeah, I was there for a little over 7 years, and it was a blast. So just a small faith-based organization, and yeah, it was just really neat how everything kind of lined up.
You were hooked.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And it seems like a lot of people have a different path into nonprofit work from maybe what they went to school for or what they had thought they would do, but then they end up in it. And it's just the compelling drive to help the mission or the cause or whatever they're working towards.
For sure.
In that bigger picture.
I had no idea what I was going to do. And, I had many ideas, ranging from, working in lawn care, because I did that as a child. I was like, hey, I could probably make some kind of business doing this, to, I don't know, I was exploring just every opportunity. These big companies would come by the university and, have these kind of career days. And I'm looking at all these opportunities at these fancy places. And then I just felt kind of uncomfortable about the whole thing for whatever reason. It just didn't seem right for me. And then I just stumbled into this event and I was like, this is it. Who cares what the pay is or whatever, this is it. And I really feel like I can do this and I can do it well. And I'm going to be super excited every day to head to the office. And yeah, it worked out beautifully.
Awesome. Well, then over time, you really narrowed in on the major gifts piece of that, which is a unique specialty, but so needed in nonprofit work.
Sure.
So tell us a little more about that. And first, let's just start with, what do you mean by major gifts?
Yeah. So yeah, great question. So yeah, still to this day, I would say if I were to take a test on, nonprofit terminology, I'd probably get like a D+ at best or something. But from my perspective, to me, major gifts refers to the practice of having one-on-one in-person relationships with donors. I don't think there's a number, I don't care what the number is. For somebody, it might be $500 as a major gift for them, for that donor, for your everything's dependent upon the donor and the organization. It's just numbers at the end of the day. So to me, it's much more about what is the approach that is used in this situation. And to me, it's about getting in front of people face to face, getting to know them personally, and then you presenting them with opportunities that would be meaningful to them or major or however you want to talk about it. But yeah, I don't think there's any specific dollar amount on it. A lot of organizations, it's, starting somewhere between $1,000 and $10,000.
When you put it that way, it's a matter of building one-on-one relationships. That doesn't sound so intimidating. When you say major gifts, it's kind of like, ooh, you want me to go and ask for $1 million, or what do I say? Like feeling kind of tongue-tied. Do you hear that or kind of see that with people when you start talking about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I hadn't thought about that specific way of looking at it. But yeah, people are definitely intimidated big time by major gifts.
I can see why.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm just going to give it a whirl. And, I remember someone I was working with, this was someone at the organization I was working with that didn't do fundraising of any sort, but she was interested in getting into major gifts. And, so I had a phone call with her to just kind of talk through some things. And I'll never forget, she said, major gifts just seem so mysterious. And I'm pretty sure you used the exact same word when I listened to your introductory episode of the podcast about grant writing. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that either, but I think that's true too. I think grant writing and major gifts are both mysterious for those not doing them on a daily basis. And I just thought that was a perfect way of putting it. And yeah, it's just like, part of it is because so few people talk about, what does it mean to be in relationship with your donors? And that's the whole reason I started my podcast, One Visit Away, is to just have people tell stories of what do these things look like? Because if you can hear it in a story, like if you're to tell somebody, you just need to go, raise major gifts for your organization, that is intimidating. It means nothing. But if you tell people stories of how just normal people like you, me, Bob and Sue, who, like me having, my degree was in theology, and I grew up in a household that like philanthropy was not a word that I think I ever even heard. And, like, if you can just hear normal people tell stories of, and so I, had coffee with this person, and I got to know him. I asked some good questions. I asked him, hey, what is it about our organization that's caused you to give so generously? And then that led them to just sharing about why they're so passionate about this, about an experience they maybe had as a child that has stuck with them their whole life and made this particular cause so important to them. When we can understand that, and it all makes sense to us and them, and then we share with them, this is what we're trying to do over the next 12 months at our organization. And you can see their eyes light up that like, and they tell you, I want to help. When those things are in place, now it's just so natural to say, Bob and Sue, I'd like you to consider a gift of $10,000 to our organization this year so that we can help, X number of children have warm meals at home every night. Like, what could be less intimidating than that? It's like you're just helping somebody who deeply desires to do something. You're helping them get an opportunity to do it. And if we don't do it, nobody else is, because Tesla, Apple, and whoever are marketing to them every single day saying, spend your money here. This is what's going to make you happy. The number of times a human has a conversation with someone that knows them and loves them and asks them to give to something that would matter to them, it basically never happens, which is why, and I'll stop my little soliloquy here, which is why if you go get some visits scheduled with your donors and start doing these things, giving can increase dramatically because basically no one is doing this with them.
What an incredible way of looking at it and breaking it down. I see so many parallels to grant writing and to what you're doing and what you're saying. And the way you said that, would you consider giving $10,000 to help this many kids for this many months to do this project? That's exactly what we do with grant writing.
Yep.
You quantify, you break it down, you paint that clear picture and cast that vision of the difference they can make by partnering with you.
Yeah.
And they're looking to do good in the community.
Yeah, for sure. And that's it, and one of the things I'd be curious about, and I know you're going to come on my podcast, so we'll talk more about this, but I would imagine that one of the things that sets up people who are applying for grants for success is that they didn't just, sit in a cave and send out, they just outbound information to all these different organizations and waited for the money to roll in. I would imagine the most successful grant writers have, much closer, like two-way relationships the foundations or whoever it is they're requesting grants from. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Yes.
Cool.
And that's how you get the longer term, more sustainable funding, is you build the relationships, you find the funders that want to make an impact over time and see the program grow. They know it's an investment and they see the impact it's making, and it compounds each year when you're working together over time. So absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it. Is at the end of the day, you know, I love your the name of your podcast, Grant Writing Simplified. It's very what's his name? Why can I never remember his name? Don. It's very Don Miller-esque, building a story brand.
Yes.
And but it's just
think about that.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, it's not the cutesy name. It's just like, this is what it is. And it's like Grant Writing Simplified. One of the things, on my website, if you go to onevisitaway.com, the first thing it says is major gifts made simple. And it's the same idea. Is just like, these are intimidating concepts, but they're not intimidating things to actually do if you have just a little bit of guidance that puts you in front of, like, puts you into relationship with other humans.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes you just need a few key pieces to get you started. And then it's about taking action day after day. I say it a lot. Action brings clarity.
Yes.
And it's so true. And I'm sure with yours too, like some days it just comes down to taking that action. I just listened to your episode about make that one more call at the end of the day. And, if you didn't take that action, and kind of like, if you don't submit a grant, the answer is definitely no. But if you submit the grant, if you make the phone call, at least you stand a chance.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I think, man, this is, I haven't explicitly said this yet, but I'll say it now. I know like nothing about grants and have almost zero experience. There was probably 5 organizations that I had some involvement with applying for a grant, but I never wrote them. It was just like, if anything, I was knew the executive director or the trustee or whatever it was. And so not my area of expertise at all, but totally lost my train of thought. Wow.
Okay.
What you were. So,
I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
This happens to me all the time. So remind me the point you were making right before I diverted us.
What was my point? It's similar between the two. Simple. If you don't ask, the answer's no.
Oh, that's it. So yeah, I would imagine one of the things that happens with a lot of, some of these grant giving organizations have a rule that's like, you have to apply for 3 years in a row or something like that before you're even considered. I think I've seen something like that before. And even if they don't have a rule that's that specific, I would bet you a lot of people apply for the grant one time, and they don't get funded. And they're just like, okay, well, that's a waste of time. And then they give up on it. When I would imagine if you looked at the stats, it's something like, like 50% of, grants only get approved after the X number of times of applying. And so, kind of by definition, if you're not trying at least this many times, you're really not even giving yourself a chance to succeed. And if you only apply once to the organization giving the money away, it's like, well, they really weren't in this much anyway. So glad we passed on that one.
Yeah, making it about the money. And it is helpful to go back and try to get feedback and to say, what could we have done better? How could we improve next time? What kind of projects are you looking for to see if it's a good fit, not to twist your mission to make it fit, but to see how can we partner with you in the future if this wasn't a good fit now. And sometimes the no has nothing to do with your proposal. It may just be they didn't have as much money to give out this year, or they had some restrictions and had to funnel them a different direction this time.
Yeah.
So it could be for so many factors that have nothing to do with your organization. And that's where that consistency, identifying the really good fit opportunities and focusing on those, as opposed to just firing off anything left and right. Kind of like if you just walked into a meeting the first time meeting somebody and said, "Hey, nice to meet you. I heard you're interested. Would you give us $10,000?
Yeah.
It's probably not how you'd go about it.
Yeah.
There's a little more strategic thinking that needs to go into it. And the same way with grants, of being able to approach that and look at that as a bigger picture, as opposed to, like you're saying, well, we got rejected, let's move on, forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
there's like 1,000 things a 1,000 directions I could go.
I know. And I feel like there's so many parallels and so much that we could dig into with it.
Yeah. I'll give you, I mean, if you want, I can give you just something, a little bit of direction for your listeners if they're just wanting to know, like, how in the world do I get started with this?
Yeah, that would be perfect. That's actually what I was about to ask you.
Okay, sweet.
If somebody's thinking, oh, kind of like with grants, this is overwhelming, I don't even know where to start. That's the question I hear most about grants. And you may hear that a lot too.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I would say, look, to make it super simple, if you're just wanting to dip your toes into the water, the first thing I would do is, you can make the list longer if you want to, but especially if you're a smaller organization and you're not doing any kind of major gift work, I would just look at who are your top donors. I'd rank them from highest level of giving, down, and start with like the top 10 or something, and a very manageable number. If you're not visiting with these people, I can basically guarantee you that none of them are giving anywhere close to their capacity. Sometimes it happens that someone's just so unbelievably in love with the mission that they're giving you just everything that they can, but I've almost never seen it. And part of the reason is because if you are not visiting with them, especially people who have, the more money that people give away, the more likely it is other people are visiting with them. So if you're not meeting with somebody who's giving your organization $25,000 a year, well, there's probably some people who are visiting with them who are asking them for 50, 100,000 or more. And it's a lot easier to say no to the ask that you never made than it is to say no to the $50,000 ask that a real human did make of them. So first thing I say is, you got to start visiting with your donors. How do you do that? Real simple. This is I've got some webinars y'all can look up later that are free to access if you want to dive deeper in this, but real simple. If somebody's in your database, they've given to you, super simple script. Hey, Bob, Kevin with Acme Nonprofit. The reason I'm reaching out to you today specifically is to schedule a visit regarding our organization. How does next Tuesday at 10 a.m. look for you? That is the exact script I have used to schedule over 1,000 visits. It's super simple. It's very direct. Sometimes people think it's a little aggressive, but it's not. It's actually just, you're being very respectful to the donor in telling them exactly what you hope to get out of this interaction. And they're not wondering, like, if you send them something vague, like I used to when I was first getting started, you call somebody up, hey, this is me 7 years ago before I knew what I was doing in my best attempt. Hey, Bob, it's Kevin with Acme Nonprofit. I'm just calling you to say thank you so much for all your support. Like, really appreciate it. Oh, you're welcome, Kevin. Oh, looks here like your office is kind of by my office. Maybe sometime we could get together for lunch. Yeah, that'd be great if one time we did that. Okay, well, I guess we'll see when that happens. Like, just these super awkward, like, you're just beating around the bush. Like, don't do that. It drives people crazy. Everyone's confused. No one knows what you want. Just tell them, I'd like to schedule a visit with you regarding our organization. Tell them that, and then suggest a specific date and time, because it's a lot easier for someone to just look at that one thing on their calendar and say, yeah, I can do that. Or, well, no, I can't do that, but I could do an hour earlier. than it is to just, hey, what's a good time in the next 2 weeks? Now I got to look at every single possible minute for a, 2-week period. So I won't go all the way down that rabbit hole, but yeah, just reach out to your donors, tell them you'd like to schedule a visit. And then when you get in front of them, what in the world do you talk about? Just ask good questions. Some of them, what is it that's caused you to give so generously to our organization? If you are, whatever type of organization you are, like let's say you're working in, feeding the hungry. You could say something like, where does feeding the hungry fit in your giving priorities? And we're just trying to ask questions to get people to start sharing about themselves, about how they think about generosity. And some of these questions will help you determine capacity. Like another one you can ask is, what are your top philanthropic priorities? See what people say to that. Some people will some people share more than others. They'll tell you specifics right away. I've asked people that question, what are your top philanthropic priorities? And they just immediately said, well, we gave a $1.6 million gift to our church that we just finished out. We're on the board of this organization. We got a $1.5 million gift going on there. And it's like, if I wouldn't have asked that question, I wouldn't have known that. And the last thing I'll say here before I, just talk for 30 minutes straight is the idea of the donor telling you information is absolutely crucial. And this is why I do not like wealth screening tools used for individuals. If you want to use it to prioritize a list of 50,000 people, sure. But if I find out that information about this donor through some creepy software research, that doesn't help me, because now it's just, I know this information that they don't know that I know. So it's just weird. But if the donor tells me, I gave a $1.6 million gift to my church, I gave a $1.5 million gift to this organization I'm the board of, not only do I know with certainty that that information is accurate, which you can't trust from these softwares, but two, they have entrusted me with that information. They're saying, Kevin, I am comfortable with you knowing I have this kind of capacity and I give gifts of this size. And so now that information is fair game, and it allows you to very easily do things like, it's probably not going to happen on that first visit, but maybe a month down the road or 2 years down the road, who knows exactly when it's going to happen, but it gives you the opportunity to at some point reference that comment. Hey, Bob, the first time we met, you told me about a $1.5 million gift you gave to wherever, or maybe it's a $50,000 gift. Is a gift of that size something you could ever see yourself excited to give to our organization? And just see what they say. You can very comfortably, naturally, no pressure, walk into a conversation about a gift the size of, 5 of your houses, with it just not being a big deal. You're just referencing something they shared with you and seeing what they think about it. So I'll stop there.
That's a really powerful approach. And that takes the intimidation factor way down. And it sounds like it makes it more about keeping it straightforward and simple and listening. Exactly. It's more of a discovery of, you want to learn about the donor as opposed to pushing all your information at them.
Yes. Yeah. The word vomit is the curse of all development officers. And I mean, we get super excited about our work and we want to tell people everything they could possibly want to know. But the fact is that they don't care. They do not care about the 17 different areas of minutia that, get you excited. They might care about 2% of that. And that's one of the reasons asking questions and listening is so important. Mm-hmm. Because if we do enough of that, then we can find out, what is it about what is the 5% of information that I can share with them that would really be meaningful to them. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. It's way more about asking questions and listening than it is about wowing people with graphs and fancy cases for support.
Mm-hmm. Right. And finding out which pieces of those things would really get their attention. Which pieces are they interested in? So yeah, you can know your stuff inside and out, and you should.
Yes.
Like you said, it doesn't mean you need to tell them every single piece. You
Right.
pull out the highlights based on what you're learning from them and get to know them first before you just start unloading.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like one of the first things that came to my mind, and this is maybe a ridiculous example, but it's like, let's say there's some sort of building project that an organization is doing. And, like there could be this really cool piece of technology that somehow limits the usage of each, of the water in the toilets. And it's like, you think that is the coolest thing ever because it has, this environmental impact. And like, okay, that like, maybe that's super important to you, but like maybe the donor cares about the fact that like, children are going to be able to go to school in a safe environment here or something like that. Like, so like we can just get, and it seems ridiculous, but I've been in visits where people will just key in on these like super low level, I gotta spend 10 minutes telling you about the flushing technology that like, no, your presentation should probably be somewhere like 3 to 5 minutes tops, and then open it up for questions. Like people will key in on the areas they're interested in. We don't have to assume everything that they might want to know.
Mm-hmm. And they'll tell you what they want to know. And you can tell by reading them, like, are their eyes starting to glaze over? Have you lost them? Do we need to move on to something else? And yeah, I think being in tune to that is really important in that, and making it about learning and building the relationship as opposed to the paralyzing thought of, I have to get the money.
Right.
Instead, just approaching it as there's a person on the other side of everything.
Yes. Exactly. And yeah, that's one of the biggest mistakes I made when I was getting first started was making it all about the money. And like, it's funny because I will say, like I did a podcast episode and a fundraising and a LinkedIn post titled Fundraising is About the Money, because I do like fundraising is about the money. In my opinion, it's what I'm trying to combat there is this idea that fundraising is not about the money. What you said is 100% true. Fundraising is not all about the money. And that's where the mistake comes in. And that's one of the biggest errors I made when I was first getting started. Was, to me, the only measure of success was, do I walk out of this visit with money or do I not? And if that is your measure for success, and there were a lot of reasons that I had that perspective. Some of them were like, go hit these goals so that you can have a job here. So it was like external pressure that was put on me. A way, way, way better perspective is, let me serve this donor well. Like now, after I made the shift, my measure of success was, when I left that visit, did I serve that donor well? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means just sitting with somebody for an hour. You had an hour on the calendar and you thought you were going to ask them for this huge gift. And it turns out they've got a relative in the hospital, and you just talk about that for an hour and you walk out of there never mentioning your organization. And if that's what it meant to serve that donor well, that was a successful visit. Same thing, though, if you go into a visit, and I've had this happen before, and somebody walks into the conference room and says, I got 5 minutes, go. And you wind up asking them for a $10,000 gift at the end of that visit, that can be a successful visit, because that's what serving them well meant. They wanted to get in there, tell me the information, make the ask, and leave. I got to go raise $500 million for my hedge fund. And like, it's not, success does not look the same in every situation. It's did I serve this person well? And that can mean a lot of different things.
I love that thought of, did I serve them well? And serving, we tend to think of, oh yeah, we serve our clients, we serve the community, but you're also serving your donors. And I love that perspective of, can we serve them too? Can we care about them as people? Can we listen? Can we get to know them and their people, their families, their jobs, the things that are important to them? Just because that's the right thing to do, not so we can get money, but because it's a part of the bigger picture and of service. And I love that approach.
Yeah, makes it a lot more fun for all parties involved.
Yes. And that just brings it down. That takes some of the pressure off and some of the, the angst of it, of just, we need to get to know these people. These are great people. They have good hearts. They want to give, they want to make a difference in the community. So let's get to know that at a deeper level.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the last points I'll make, maybe as we probably get close to wrapping up here, is don't put so much pressure on yourself, and don't think you have to know how to do any of this. At the end of the day, just be super honest with your donors. That's one of the things I always recommend, is like, don't put up any kind of front. Just tell people what is on your mind and ask people what is on your mind. So like, if you're going into a visit with, super wealthy, powerful, whoever, and you're all nervous, like, just tell them. Like, I've told people going into a visit, especially if you're new to this and like you've never really done this before, maybe it's your first visit you're going on. I would walk into that visit and, okay, maybe you're not going to be nervous, but if you're like 99.99% of humans in all time, you will be very nervous going into that visit. And I would just tell the person, Bob and Sue, I just want to let you know before we get going, I have never done this before. This is my first visit to talk about generosity. And my only goal today is to serve you well. And I'm going to give it my best shot. How does that sound to y'all? Like, and like, if you just tell people that, man, like, the donors are humans too, and they will respect, unless this is just like, Ebenezer Scrooge or some just heartless, totally cold person, which rarely exists. They're going to be like, oh my goodness, like, sit down, like, take a load off. We're all on the same team here. And it's just going to, if you can just be super honest with your donors in your thoughts and in your questions, it's going to lead to just very positive experiences for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's so similar, because a few episodes back, I talked about addressing red flags in your grant writing. If there's a red flag, sometimes people think, oh, we need to sweep that under the rug and don't talk about it. But that's exactly what they're going to notice and be concerned about. But if you address it and say, look, we know this has been a tough time in our nonprofit. We've had some transitions. Things are a little, uproar right now, but here's how we're addressing it. Here's our plan to move forward. And here's what we're doing next. Boom. You've addressed the red flags so that it's not an issue. It's not a concern anymore. You've headed it off. You're very straightforward about it, and just let them know they're people too. And they understand, and they can sympathize with that. They can see where you're coming from. And I think that helps build trust when you go in with that of just, look, I'm new at this. I'd love to get to know you. And again, like you said, I just want to serve you well. I think that's a really great approach and a great stance to take.
Yeah, and that's exactly another huge can of worms you just opened up when you mentioned the red flag kind of things. It reminded me of another gigantic, like, this is costing you millions of dollars mistakes, is assumptions. And so many times we as major gift fundraisers assume things about our donors. They've been giving us $5,000 a year for the past 10 years, and they're on our board, and they're on the committee, and they know about what we do, and they're super passionate. But that's all they can give, because if they could do more, they would. How do you know that? Like, because you're somehow, have access to all of their financial information. Like, it's super easy to assume that, like, whoever's given us $1,000 a year for 20 years must be all they can do. They know everything. They know what we're trying to do. They would help if they could. Not true at all. You got to get in front of your donors, and you've got to stop reconsider everything. If you know something about them because someone else told you, it's not true. That's one of my rules. If you didn't hear it from the donor themselves, it's not true. It happens all the time. Your board member will tell you, oh, that they can't give anymore. They're, they just got that whatever job. They're given at their capacity. They don't have money. How do they know that? Do they have all of their financial information? Do they know about, all the inheritances they've received, about patents that they own? Do they know about, how much money they're making from their businesses? Maybe there's an endless number of reasons people could have money that you don't know about. And so if you can just get in front of your donors and start asking some of these questions, a really great one, if somebody's giving you $1,000 a year, just asking them, hey, where does our organization currently fit in your giving priorities? And you will be amazed at what some people tell you that you thought they're $50,000 a year because they're your number one donor to your organization. You thought that was their number one gift. They might give that gift to 15 different places and much larger ones to several others. There is no way you can know this other than sitting down with them one-on-one, asking good questions and listening. And anybody that tells you there's another way is doing it illegally because they're spying on, they're breaking into their bank accounts or whatever. There's just no other way to do it.
Those are some great examples of open-ended questions to really show interest and care. And then that allows them to volunteer what they're comfortable with and to share as much as they feel ready to. And then to take the assumptions a step further with, I think, both our situations, grant writing and major gifts. A no doesn't necessarily mean no forever, or no, we don't like you, or no, this proposal was awful. It may not mean that. It may just mean we can't do that right now, or this isn't the best timing, but we'd love to see you come back, or we'd love to continue the conversation, or this project wasn't right, but we'd love to do something else with you instead. Yes. So again, reframing those assumptions, is that something in our own head, or is that reality? And we really need to discern and take a hard look at those things. Right.
Yeah. And it happens to the best of it. I mean, I do it.
Oh, yeah.
I do it all the time, even though there's opportunities that will come up for me now in, business where for whatever reason, I'm just like, oh, they probably couldn't afford this service or whatever. And it's like, how do you know that? Like, oh, because you looked at their 990. So what? How do you you don't know what's in the bank today. You don't know who else at the organization might be able to pay for it. There's 1,000 different things that could make the no that we invented into a yes, but we just want to think we're somehow the world's greatest mind readers. And,
right. When we have one small piece of the story.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy. So
yeah, I feel like we could come up with parallels all day long.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I know we have to eventually wrap it up at some point. So what would you boil it down to? If you could say, start with one key thing, what would the first step be?
Go get a visit scheduled. And I will I'll just tell you straight right now, you're going to suck for a long time. Like it's just part of the process. I mean, I've been on over 1,000 visits, and some of the most awkward, like, oh my goodness, how did I say that? I want to go just slither out of this room and never be spoken of again. happened, years into doing this and coaching people on how to do it. Like, you are going to make mistakes. Do not wait to get a visit scheduled until you think you're ready, because you're never going to be ready. Just go get in front of the donor and just be honest with them. That's it. Just get in front and get practice, and you're going to get, over time, you're going to get more confident at it, but you've just got to get the reps in, and you've got to get into the habit of getting into uncomfortable situations and being okay with that.
It's like grant writing. It's like building a muscle. You don't just all of a sudden have the muscles overnight. You have to stay consistent and keep at it.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. That's terrible, but also encouraging to hear that advice.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm telling people they don't have to be intimidated by it, and then I'm telling them they're going to be awful. But that's part of the expectation. Is like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but it's like, if you're going to get into a car when you're learning how to drive, and someone, if they tell you, oh, it's super easy, like you're going to have a great time, just get on the highway, it's going to be great. Like, if that's your expectation, you're probably going to die. But if somebody tells you this is going to take you a while to learn, but if you follow these simple things, like, you're going to be okay, and it's going to become second nature to you. And these things, you're not actually going to have to worry about, like, wait, how do I move my foot off the brake onto the gas pedal? Like, it just becomes natural. And so the more you do it, the more of these steps, the more of these questions that used to be really intimidating to me, like, hey, what are your top philanthropic priorities? I used to be terrified to ask that question. I don't know exactly why, because it's not some super personal question, but it's just like, new things are scary, and you just gotta get some practice, and over time it's going to become second nature. And ultimately it's just going to, even if the worst visit you go on is way better for your organization and the donor than not going on the visit at all. Because people like to be face to face with humans and get to have that experience of philanthropy being more personal, even if it's not perfect, because it's never perfect.
Right. I think a lot of times it just comes down to, we have to get out of our own way.
Yep.
And do the thing.
Yep, exactly. For sure.
So, yeah, this is so practical. And I love the way you just bring it down and make it so approachable. So, like, okay, I could ask that question. I mean, I'm not a major gifts person, but some of these things, it's like, yeah, I could have that conversation. Yes. I could ask somebody, what drives you to do this?
Yeah, anybody can do this. There's like, you don't need to, like, I'm talking a lot right now because we're on a podcast, but I don't talk a lot when I'm on visits. I just sit there, and like every 5 minutes, I ask a little question, and then I nod my head, and I'm thinking about what they're saying. You don't have to be like super social whatever to do major gifts well. You just need to be able to ask some simple questions, listen, care about people, let them know you care about them, and present the opportunity. And then, just because you believe in the mission, we're going to ask boldly and just let it sit there. You're not asking, like, one of the things I remind people of is, I've been on over 1,000 visits. I've raised millions of dollars personally. I've been coaching people for years. I've interviewed dozens of people who do major gifts on my podcast. There is only one time in all of that experience I've ever heard about someone getting angry because they were asked for too much. It was a $250,000 gift. The person went ballistic, marched into the office and started like chewing people out. And guess what they did 2 weeks later? They sent in a check for $250,000. So my point is, everybody's worried they're going to upset people. And it's like, the one time I've ever heard it happening, the person still gave the gift. So we just have to remind ourselves, we're not doing this because Well, like, yes, we want to serve our donors, but we're not there to please them. We're not there to like, our role isn't to just like, I'm just gonna make Bob and Sue, like I'm just gonna be their, personal butler all day. No, like we're here because we care about whatever the mission is. And part of that, certainly we care about the donor, but it's like when I'm asking somebody for a $50,000 or $100,000 gift, the main thing that compels me to do that is because I care about these beneficiaries that we serve. And that's when you're there asking for that gift, you just got to remember, you're not there for you. You are the only person. If you do not ask this person for that gift, no one else is going to do it. So you're there representing that person, and just remind yourself of your why every day. And just go out there, yes, serve your donors, but ask boldly, because those that you serve are worth it.
Some good stuff there. I could go into a whole nother thread of a lot of things there. But yeah, really, you're the connection point between the donor and the opportunity to give to that cause that's meaningful to them.
Yes.
I love what you said about you're there to serve them, not to please them.
Yeah, it's one of my. I don't know if you ever read the book $1 Million Consulting by Alan Weiss.
I just did.
Okay, there you go. One of the things he says, my goal as a consultant is to be respected, not liked. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's maybe not the exact language I would use in this instance, but the point is the same. Is like, one of the mistakes you can make working with donors is just feel like you need to, I don't know, like bend to everything they could ever want. And like, hey, if I tell you we got to meet at 9 p.m. or whatever, it's like, look, if you're married and you got kids and you got to be home with the family, just tell people that. Your goal, like, if you have boundaries around your work, most people will respect that. They may not like it initially, but again, your goal should be to be respected, not liked. If you're just trying to be pleasing to people, you're going to be running around like a crazy person all day and never really get anything done. So I think it's totally fine to have boundaries. And, I'm not going to answer my phone after 6 p.m. or whatever. And I don't know how I got started down that tangent, but there we are.
That's a good point, though. Definitely true. And similar with grants, like it's good to know your priorities and your mission so you can find funders that align with that and not try to twist out of shape to fit something. And then you spread your team's bandwidth too thin. You're getting off course from your mission and going down a path that you really didn't need to.
Yes, for sure. So I got to get going here, but any closing things you'd like to listen to?
We keep finding all these extra. This is great. Is there a resource in particular that has been especially meaningful to you?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few. I'll just give you two to keep it simple. Born to Raise by Jerry Panis is an excellent book it's kind of a case study on the most successful major gift fundraisers. And actually, I'll just leave it there. I'll keep it simple with that.
Awesome. Okay. I will link to that in the notes. And then, of course, tell us, where can people find you online and how can they learn more about your program?
Yeah, for sure. So onevisitaway.com is my website. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Follow me there.
Yes, great stuff on there.
Well, thank you. And then, if you want to get a little starter thing on my website, if you go to onevisitaway.com, it's now at the bottom of the page. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can click download the guide. It's just like three simple tips to start doing major gifts. And the last thing, which is obviously a big lift, but I just launched my course earlier this week.
Yay.
Major Gift Millions. So if you want to get a super deep dive, that's just onevisitaway.com/millions. And it goes into all of it. But that's where you can find me. And this is a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been some great stuff here, and I know it'll be useful. So thank you for your time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Teresa, and look forward to having you on the One Visit Away podcast soon.
Yeah, same. All right, what did you think of this one? Kevin's full of great info, isn't he? I would love to hear your biggest takeaway and the thing that you're going to start implementing. This month in this fundraising series, we're all about taking action. So figure out what that needs to be for you. And if you're not sure, then maybe your next action is to go over and take my quiz. Do you have what it takes to be a grant writer? At teresahuff.com/quiz. And then I can help you figure out your next action steps towards building your career. If you're a nonprofit and you need some help building your grant readiness, then go take the grant readiness audit at teresahuff.com/grant-ready. All right, friends, I hope you have a great week and go change your world.